Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, October 12th Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Meeting of the Board of School Directors. I will take audience recognition on agenda items. If anyone's interested, please sign in with Ms. LaPera. Seeing none, we will move over to our superintendent, Mr. Copeland, presentations.
Good evening, everyone. During the curriculum committee meeting, we had an update on some assessment information about advanced placement and the IB program, and we'd like to present that this evening. I'd like to introduce Mr. Klein so that he can introduce those folks who are making the presentation. Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. This is a follow-up to a presentation we made last Wednesday, and it follows the data streams that we've been talking about with the PSSA testing and the Keystone testing. Mr. Cody has done a great job in putting this information together. I just want to talk briefly about what you're going to see. You're going to see advanced placement and IB data, and Brian will do some of the introductions on that. But it's also interesting to take a quick aside and talk a little bit about the big picture. So I think it is absolutely remarkable that you have 1,700 plus enrollees in your advanced placement course, and that doesn't take into account the IB course. I think that's a remarkable number of kids who are enrolled. Now, it's not 1,700 kids. I think that represents about 600 to 700 kids that are involved in the process. But the 1,700 is a fantastic number. That means that kids are taking multiple courses. I did a calculation of the number of students who received 3, 4, and 5, which are considered passing an AP, and that's about 1,092, almost 1,100 students passed those AP courses at a 3, 4, and 5. If you simply quantify that, if you take it and assume that 2/3 of those kids will also ask their higher level education, their colleges and universities for graduate credit, that at a St. Joe's credit hour, about $1,300 per credit hour, that equates to almost $2.9 million of savings. If you go down to half of those kids, because not everybody in their major or in the school will actually ask for that credit, it's roughly $2 million. So it's an interesting way to quantify the excellent education program that Lower Merion offers its students. Let me introduce Mr. Cody, and he's going to do the actual data stream information and then introduce the IB program too. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Good evening, Board. Want to just start off by saying we've taken the questions at the CCOB meeting on Wednesday into some consideration, and we were able to pull together some data slides to address the questions that were given to us last Wednesday. So this slide is a new slide added to the presentation. I'm not going to be showing all the slides that we presented, so I shaved some slides off for the interest of the evening and added some new ones in. So this is a representation of the total numbers of AP courses taken by students. So an example would be, this is a representation where one student could be taking more than one AP course, such as 3. So these are just indications of the total number of AP courses taken. And what we see are the comparisons between schools. Harriton High School representing the blue bars and Lower Merion High School representing the red bars. But more importantly, we see that there is steady growth in the total number of courses taken among both high schools, with steady growth represented for students being enrolled in multiple courses through the 2013-14 year up until the current year of 2015-16. And those numbers for the 2015-16 year are really rapidly growing this year compared to years past. This is a slide that we took a look at CCOB. This is a slide that represents higher levels of participation in the AP and IB courses. There are 180 students that are represented here. If we look at the highest bar of blue in the AP U.S. Government and Politics class, 180 students is equivalent to running 6 sections of this particular class, which is astonishing because most districts, neighboring districts and districts alike, would really marvel over the number of students that are enrolled in these particular classes. So as you can look across the bar, we definitely have high levels of student participation represented in our AP courses across the board. We also have some low points. So these low points are representative of possibly students that are involved in the IB courses, and Mr. O'Brien will be talking to you in a bit about that. But where there's not students that are represented in IB and our numbers are low, we want to, as administration, take a closer look at that and have closer conversations with the building administration, take a look at our course selections, have discussion with school counselors, and more importantly, have discussions with students about what drives them in choosing particular classes during registration times. Here's a representation by ethnicity according to each AP course that we offer here in the Lower Merion School District. We're currently offering 21 AP courses, and this is just a representation of the breakdowns. I did a breakdown of ethnicity as we reported in 2014-15, and I'd like to share those percentages with you. Our American Indian, Native Alaskan, Alaskan Native represented about 0.02 of the population. Our Asian Hispanic represented 9.66. Our Black and African American group represented 7.88% of the population. Our Hispanics were 3.69% of the population. Our multiracial represented 3.73, and our white population was 74.95, and our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander was a 0.06 of the overall population. So when we look at these particular enrollment numbers by ethnicity, they are relative to the overall populations of our district. So keeping in mind, those were district numbers that I shared. When we break out into the individual high schools, those numbers tend to get a little smaller because of the number of students that we're actually talking about within the high schools themselves. Our enrollment by gender, we took a look here. There are disparities among our male and female. We've seen disparities of this, especially in our computer science, where we had 13 males represented and 0 females represented in the AP computer science class. We have things that in place that are addressing that. We had a visual programming course that was offered last year and being offered this year, and I'd like to share some of the numbers with you this year compared to last year. Remember, we had 0 females with a total of 13. So looking at the 2015-16 year, we have a total of 25 overall students. 4 of those students are female, 11 represented as male at Harriton High School, and we have 3 female visual arts students at Lower Merion with 7 males. So within that program, it's really a feeder for our AP computer science class. So we really hope that students matriculate from that particular course into the AP courses next year. Our AP computer science courses, we're looking at 39 students right now compared to the 13 that we see there. 4 of them representing female students and 35 representing our male population of students. Here is a comparison taking a look at students that are currently taking at least one AP class. So we went back 2 years taking a look, and we see that the number of students have increased from 651 in 2013-14 to 788 students taking at least one AP course between both high schools representing juniors and seniors. A steady climb, and as you can see, the percentage of students that are represented in the number of students also on an increase and a rise from 2013-14 to 2015-16. Here is a slide representing the disparity among schools, across schools, disparity among enrollments across schools. It's important to keep in mind that, again, like I said, some of these students may typically be taking AP courses, are enrolled in IB courses. So there is that conversation that we need to have with maybe what's the number of students and get a closer look at that, and visiting schools and having those discussions with building administration, counselors, and students. This slide represents a chart for each high school showing the total number of students that are sitting for the 2015 AP exam. This data shows, for example, at Harriton High School, a total of 301 total students tested, and those students completed a total of 636 exams. And of those 636 exams, 520 received a score of 3 or higher. So what this equates to is an 80% of exams that we're taking among the students at Harriton High School were receiving scores of 3 or higher. And we see the same sort of parallel at Lower Merion High School, that the overall students taking exams were getting a rate of 80% success of achieving a 3 or higher within that particular population as well. And here you can see the breakdowns of the student ethnicities within each category of the total number of students compared to the exams taken, and then the scores representing a 3, 4, or 5. This particular slide will represent all the 38 AP exams that are offered by College Board. What you will see in blue are the courses where we have students testing. We have students testing in 22 of these particular courses for exams, and we're offering right now, as I said earlier, 21 courses. What I'd like to call attention to in the AP Capstone, the AP Capstone was a new exam for the 2014-15 school year. We currently do not run a program for the capstones. I know that it was a discussion. We will be looking at those capstone courses. And the other under sciences, which is new this particular year, is the AP Physics 2 course, algebra-based. So a new exam offered this year by College Board. This is going to represent a breakdown of AP scores for each particular course. We do note that there's an 84.85% of students taking an AP exam that are scoring a 3, 4, or 5 when we average those particular scores. And of the 22 AP exams that are taken, we notice that there are 9 exams that are given that are scoring above a 90%, which is a high success rate for any district. So very proud of our students and staff here in the Lower Merion School District achieving such high honors within the AP courses that are indicating above 90% success with 3, 4, or 5. The greatest number of test takers were in the AP US History course with 147 course test takers in this particular course. So with that, I would like to transition to Mr. O'Brien so that he can share the 2015 IB data with you.
Good evening. I'd like to first apologize for the quality of my voice or lack thereof. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening, and thank you for the invitation to join you. Before talking in too much detail about the actual data, I'd like to contextualize a little bit what an IB score is. I think it's very natural to make comparisons between AP and IB. We do that all the time. Right now, this time of year, I'm doing lots of presentations in classes talking about how these two programs are both outstanding programs, though they're different, and it's important to understand what those differences are. This presentation specifically kind of invites that kind of comparison because we're talking AP followed by IB scores. So to sort of give a little bit of context, in IB, it's a diploma program. Students are required to commit to an entire diploma program where students study subjects across 6 different disciplines. If you're in IB, you're committing to taking IB courses in mathematics as well as the humanities in 6 different subject areas. If you're an AP student, you choose your AP courses on an a la carte basis. Just because you choose to take AP Calculus, for example, that doesn't commit you to taking AP History or any other course for that matter. So if you were to look at the typical enrollment in AP Physics, for example, and this goes for any of the subjects, in the AP course, you're going to have students who are, for the most part, really strong math science students who have chosen to take AP Physics. You might have some students who have chosen to take it as a reach course, and they'll really be challenged, and that's great, and my hat goes off to them. But that's because it's self-selected into that course, you're going to have predominantly really strong math science students in that class. if you look at an IB physics class, you're going to have really strong math science students in there. You're going to have really strong kids, but you're also going to have really strong humanities students who are in that class because they need to take an IB science class. So the relative strength of the students within that particular discipline is much more varied in an IB course than in an AP course. Additionally, AP students can decide whether or not to take the actual exam. Sometime in the spring, they'll decide whether it's worth it, depending on whether their colleges will grant credit, or whether they feel prepared for the exam, or for whatever reason may or may not choose to take the exam. IB students are committed to taking all of the assessments. So not only do you have a wider array of ability levels in any particular course, but the students who don't feel as well prepared for the assessments are still taking those assessments. So that has another impact on the data. Another factor to consider is, since we admit students through an application process, our commitment, and I believe it's the ethical commitment, is to cast as wide a net as possible, admit all students for whom the program would be appropriate, and challenge students to rise to that occasion and to establish a safety net for students who might be struggling. That's the right thing to do as educators. That is what we do. And if we take a hit on the data as a result, I think that's perfectly fine. Our diploma acquisition rate really hasn't taken a hit, but in some of our courses, the scores are probably a little bit lower as a result. But again, we're providing great opportunities for students. We allow our non-IB students, the students who are not committed to the diploma, to take our elective courses in economics, psychology, visual arts, music, and theater. Because those students are not invested in a 2-year diploma program where everybody else was invested, they don't necessarily have the same level of investment in succeeding on the assessments. Most of them try really hard and are hardworking students, but the level of investment in achieving that minimum score isn't necessarily as high as it is for students who are invested in the diploma. And last but not least, if you look at sort of graphing data of how 3s, 4s, and 5s in AP compare to each other versus how 4s, 5s, 6s, and 7s compare to each other in IB, it's substantially more difficult, statistically speaking, to get a 7. IB scores are on a scale of 1 to 7. 7s are great. 1s should be avoided like the plague. It's substantially more difficult to get a 7 in an IB course than it is to get a 5 on an AP exam. Same goes for 6s and 4s, et cetera. So through those lenses, I think it's important to understand or to see what the data reflects. Now, getting to actually the slide that's in front of you, this slide eliminates some of the courses with a lower level of enrollment for confidentiality purposes. Obviously, if there's such a small number of students, they can be easily identified. But what you're seeing is the number of candidates who tested in that subject last year, and the percentage of students who scored 4 through 7. 4 is commonly considered to be the breaking point for passing, quote unquote, but I use that term very loosely because even if you get a 3 or even a 2, not that that's good, in an IB course, you can still earn the diploma if you compensate for that with a higher score somewhere else. Some of the smaller, lower percentages here, economics, it's one of our elective courses open to non-diploma students. Psychology, higher level, it's one of our elective courses open to diploma students. Mathematics, higher level, is not one of those courses, but it's a really, really hard course. So that percentage is actually very consistent with the worldwide average. Of the 27 subject areas in which we had students registered, in 17 of them, at least 80% of the students scored scores of 4 through 7, which is really quite nice. So our students are doing quite well. This slide shows the number of students enrolled in our 11th and 12th grades as diploma candidates, and that's on the left, and on the right is diploma and non-diploma students. As I had mentioned, we invite non-diploma students to take our elective courses, so those numbers are a little bit higher, and that's disaggregated by gender and by race. Our program had traditionally been roughly 50-50 male-female. We've skewed more female than male over the last few years. I'm not entirely sure why, and I'm kind of hoping that doesn't continue to be the case because I'd like it to be equally accessible. Well, it certainly is equally accessible. I'd like it to be equally enrolled by both boys and girls. We have worked hard at attracting our minority students into our program, to increase diversity within the program, and to have students who are not as often represented in the more challenging of classes to be in our diploma program. There are a couple of impediments that we traditionally face each year. One is that the math class, all three math classes, assume as prior knowledge a foundation in Algebra 2. Currently, right now, there are 6 African American students, at Harriton at least, enrolled in Algebra 2 as sophomores. So the pool of potential diploma candidates, at least on the Harriton side of the district, is pretty small. And assuming that those students will vary in the decisions that they make, just naturally baked into that is going to be a fairly small number. Another impact is that the most recent decision for redistricting has made Harriton High School a little bit less diverse than it had been in the past. So the numbers just simply aren't as much there as they had been in terms of being able to increase diversity and enrollment of minority students in our program. This is a comparison of diplomas awarded by Lower Merion School District's IB program versus the rest of the world, or versus the world entirely, including the US, I should say. I spoke earlier about how I'm ethically perfectly fine if we take a hit on the data based on our admissions practices. Clearly, you can say that we have not. We are consistently above the international norm. The international norm hasn't hit 80% since 2006, I believe. Every year since then, it's been consistently a point or two below 80%. We are consistently at or above that, with only one exception in the history of our program that we're actually below the international norm. And I think that was also in 2006. Our program was substantially smaller at the time then, and just one person made a big difference in percentages. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Questions, comments on either one of the presentations?
Thanks, that was a great update, and I'm sure you guys already had a fair amount of discussion in the committee, and probably no one needs to hear me say this, but there is a lot of discussion right now in the popular press about how hard it is for girls and women in more technical fields, STEM-related fields, and there's been some pretty interesting articles recently. So I think it's great that you're aware of the issue and are looking, as you are related to all these classes, to the feeder opportunities that allow kids to end up in these classes. And I just encourage us all to continue doing that. I was very pleased to hear from my 6th grader that there's something called GLIST, Girls Lead in Science and Technology, which was a student-initiated and started club at Bala Cynwyd Middle School, partly, I think, to help with that issue. So I just, let's be attentive to that among many of the other issues that this presentation pointed out. Thank you.
Just to extend on that conversation, we last year on December 21st and 22nd, we as a district experienced the Hour of Code with our students, and that was just an awesome experience for our students and our faculty across the district for those 2 days. Such success led to our high school students going to the elementary buildings this year and continuing the work at the elementary level to start exposing our lower grade levels to the science background and computer science background, to start feeding them at a very early age in the STEM and the science background. So I just wanted to share that work that we've started last year by experiment to see how it would go has just been really taking off, and our teachers in the high school are really leading students in that path to really be mentors for our younger elementary students.
And if I could also add a comment, the one of the byproducts of our program skewing more female is that all those girls are in an IB science class. They may or may not have chosen to take an AP, the corresponding AP course. I mean, who knows? But every one of the girls who's in our program, as well as the boys, obviously, they're all in an IB science class, often a 2-year IB science class.
Additional questions? Dr. Gona?
I had a little bit of the opposite question of Lori, which was about the lack of boys in IB, because that's more than just a like standard deviation or standard error. I mean, it's a half less, and so I mean that seems like maybe that's an area to be more proactive, because there's a kind of shocking paucity of boys in both the diploma and non. And then my other question was more for Brian about why you use 3 as the cut score, because it was my understanding that for AP courses, it's only 4s and 5s that get college credit. And there's a lot of people clustered in, if you look by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, clustered at that 3, so the numbers would be smaller if you just looked at the 4s and 5s.
That's not traditionally what colleges and universities across the country take. The score of 3 really is the official score that colleges begin to accept. Now, it is up to the college or university, and then actually goes to the department level to make a decision. So it's sometimes harder for a major to get credit at all or by score in the major that they tested in than anything else. So let's take an example. If you're going to be a bio pre-med major, most schools will not take your AP bio course because they want you to take that course while in college. If you're an English major, I keep saying over and you have AP bio, they'll probably throw you a party that you took in advanced science, and they welcome you into the department with probably 2 courses worth of credit. So it really varies drastically across the country, but generically stating, 3 is the beginning baseline.
Dr. O'Leary?
I'm not sure who the question is to, but I think, what are your takeaways? How do you think the district will use this information to improve its programs?
Well, right now, one of the nice things about the IB, of course, is that it's more than just a test. There's a whole compendium of information, and so they get feedback on actual student work, and so there is a natural flow there. I think, as some of the presenters have said, we are certainly interested in the scores that students get. We're more interested that they take the course because we think the course in and of itself has a value. So each AP teacher has to go for continued staff development from the College Board. There's constant work that's done by IB. So it's a combination of the district and the organizations that really work together to see how we can improve the program. If we see real dips across the area, in particular, which I don't think we've seen, you would know this, then you look at it within and say, oh, something happened in the biology or something happened in the physics. I don't think we're seeing that. And we don't get necessarily an item analysis back from the assessment. You get the score back from the assessment. So it's even less instructional minded than even the state test. So you look at it, you look at the information that you're getting from the IB, which is really pretty robust. You look at the information that people are getting as they go on for further staff development with College Board. You make adjustments in your courses, and I think that's pretty much it. If there's anything else, Brian?
I'll add to that for just 1 second. I agree with Mr. Copeland. Rigor is the most important part of what happens when you offer these many AP courses. You can actually point to the fact that now when you combine IB and AP, almost 66% of your students are taking a course that is acknowledged by an outside agency as being rigorous. The other part is we've looked carefully at the trend data, and the trend data for the most part is exceptional in Lower Merion. In the places where we weren't in the 80 percentile in terms of 3, 4s, and 5s, we could go back and say to Lower Merion and Harriton principals what was going on, and they had a perfectly good or at least a reasoned explanation. Like AP Environmental was in the 50 percentile, but that's the first foray for many kids into AP, and it may or may not be the first and only, or it may not be the course that they center on. AP Latin was low too, but there were only 7 students in that class, and so the sample size was low. So again, Mr. Cody did a great job with the principals in terms of looking at this, and Lower Merion should be very proud of the fact that that trend data across 3 years has been increasing, not only in the number of students who are passing at a 3, 4, and 5 level, but for the number of students who are taking these courses. And that's reflective in your middle level programs then too. The kids are looking forward to that kind of course as they move forward.
Mr. Driscoll?
Thank you for the presentation. I actually have 2 questions. One I think is the easy one. The Harriton AP enrollment we think is down because of the students would take IB versus AP. That was what you said? Okay, thank you for that. I just wanted clarification. My second question, though, is while a lot of our kids are taking AP, which is good on the one hand, we are mindful of stress. And obviously an AP class is rigorous. So I don't know how we're looking at telling our students taking 1, 2, or 3 AP classes is fine. You don't need 15, or whatever we would say to them to try to manage expectations of succeeding, but don't overdo it and stress yourself out. I don't know if that is part of this yet, but some thoughts on that.
I think it's a combination of working with the student and the family and getting advice not only from the guidance counselor, but the prior teachers who have had, students have had. And I'm really confident that takes place a lot in the Lower Merion School District. A really honest but open conversation, challenging students, but balancing it against what they've had in the past. Rich, you want to talk about that?
The conversations are held, quite frankly, from about February on till the end of the year. And it does take a lot of back and forth, and there is a lot of parental and family input. You're dealing with history, what it took a student to do this or that, get into our favorite school, Penn. It sometimes is what if a family member did ahead of them. It's sometimes bragging rights. It's sometimes, when we look at both ends of the spectrum, we're trying to encourage students to take that extra step to stretch themselves a little bit so that they understand what it is to be college ready. And at the other end, you're right, we're trying to cap it. However, we're not the only decision makers. We are part of the decision. However, students and families have definite opinions of what it will take to do what it is they want to do with their plan. So we are, I think, very flexible. I think we are reasonable with holding our guidelines, and we do what we can. It's a balancing act, and quite frankly, we had a little bit of this discussion on Wednesday, Curriculum Committee of the Board. One of the board members asked, well, what about the ones and the twos? And I said, ooh, wait, let something go. We don't have to, everybody doesn't have to be a superstar. And when you're balancing 4 or 5 of these exams in a 2-week period, and you're still 17 or 18 years old, and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel at June 15th, and this is May 15th, and you just left for a senior experience, and wow, it all comes together. And sometimes a test isn't as important to a student for many, many reasons. They don't feel prepared, their school's not going to take it, and it's okay because they went the distance, they went the course, they learned the knowledge as much as they could, but maybe their performance on the exam isn't everything. So we walk that walk, we talk the talk, we try to do what we can, and sometimes they'll listen to us, and sometimes they'll forge ahead, and sometimes it works, and most of the time, actually, in this district, it really does work. I'm not applauding that, but that's the outcome.
Please, Ms. Robinson.
In the AP courses, how is it that a student gets their grade? Do they get it based on the AP test, or do they get it based on the exam that they also have to take?
The coursework is the result of the grade put on the transcript. The exam grade will equate or be given, granted by the college that they attend. So the result of the exam has no bearing on the grade on the transcript.
Mr. Martin, I don't even think we get the AP exam results until after graduation, correct?
Well, until the end of until after July 4th of the year that they're given.
Depending
yes.
on whether they're juniors or seniors or even sophomores.
Right,
yeah.
so it would be impossible to take that exam score and count it into the final grade, since that calculation would have to be done ahead of time.
Right. I guess I was asking because in years past, we had discussed whether or not the students were taking 2 exams back to back, and I wanted to find out if that is still the case.
I'm not really clear on the question.
Well, taking the AP exam 1 month, and then taking the final exam for the course the next month.
Correct.
So they're still doing that?
They are.
Okay.
They are, and that's the choice of the way the curriculum is constructed.
Okay.
And that's obviously for juniors. Seniors are out on their senior experience at that point.
Thank you again for the presentation. I just had one question, particularly with our African American and Latino students. How are we encouraging the participation in both the IB? And the numbers look relatively low. I think Mr. O'Brien spoke to it somewhat, but particularly around AP, how are we encouraging students and families to take advantage of the number and array of courses that we have? And then along with that, what types of support are we offering if students might not have the traditional profile of a student that would jump into AP right away, AP or IB?
So, as mentioned, around February, we start to have conversations scheduling students for the next year. And it's never a one-and-done situation, even for those students who think it is. Everything is reevaluated, everything's looked at, everything is processed. Teachers make recommendations, they're put into Power School, parents and students see them. They have a conversation with their school counselor. Is this right? Is this the balance right? Maybe you should do this. So what they do is they look at 9th grade and 10th grade. They look at things like their PSAT scores, and they really make a concerted decision about what is best for them. Is it 1 course, 2 course, 3 course? The vocabulary I ask none of my counselors to use is try. We don't try courses because you make the commitment to the course. Because when you try a course, come week 3, you want out if it's too hard. So we don't give the option of trying. I try to instill that in the counselors. So if you're in it, you're in it, and we'll have support for you. So one of the major components we do is we look at the PSAT scores, and we send letters out to parents at the time that we get the results. And we say, your student has scored in this category. We think, A, maybe they should work a little harder and see their teachers more often, because there's plenty of courses here to take. We're not recommending they take the course. We recommend that they continue to work as hard as they possibly can, with possibly advanced courses as a goal. The middle and the higher group, we encourage students to have conversations with their parents, have conversations with their school counselors and their teachers to see what courses would be appropriate. Because basically, that 40% on up in our district are really capable of taking at least one course in either, I would think, in either IB or AP, because they are college prepared. They will be college prepared. It's not a question of if. So the point is, do they want to dedicate the time it takes for that classroom learning and for that classroom grade that it will take to be successful in the course? They all have the capacity to learn. That's not the issue. The issue is they have the dedication as a student to be that type of college student, kind of in high school already. So the letters will go out, the conversations are had, teachers' recommendations, it goes back and forth. I say this on so many different accounts as it is on the whole college process. Sometimes they think there's more authority at the lunch table than there is in any of these offices that we hold. So, they talk to their friends, they talk to their brothers and sisters, they talk to their neighbors, and they have this understanding of what they want to do, what they don't want to do. But we try to really cultivate those who need to be stretched to do that, and those who need to come down off the bridge to do that also. But it's like I said, it's a crosswalk constantly.
The letters you refer to, is that the AP potential letters?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we have our own. We don't necessarily, but there's a component. Yeah. So you're welcome.
So, and just to follow up, this year in our PVOS world, which we'll be getting an update later on when those results come out, there are new projections in PVOS this year for students that are moving into the SATs as AP as well. So we will have projections within those PVOS, just like we've had for a number of years with PSSA and recently with Keystones. So that will also help classroom teachers and counselors during the scheduling time period. And I've sat extensively over the past 3 years with our counselors in the high schools, showing them the projection reports and how we can utilize those reports in terms of scheduling and taking a look at their projections. So we could utilize that piece of data as well moving forward to make sure that we're getting kids in more rigorous classes that are challenging for them.
And for IB, each year I look at data, looking at PSSA scores, Keystone scores, whatever is relevant to the history of the student, looking at DRP scores, looking at GPA, et cetera, looking specifically at math sequencing, because again, that Algebra 2 is the presumed knowledge of all three of the math classes. Identify the students that I want to have private conversations with, and I have those conversations. I reach out to parents. I invite them to come in to have conversations with me about IB as well. And again, we've had some really good success some years and not so much success in other years, but keep fighting the good fight. Thank you very much.
Dr. Golden?
Just listening to Mr. Martyr's response gave me an idea. You said, they can't sign up and then change their mind 2 weeks in, but maybe if we had a shopping period where we encourage students to even say in 10th grade sit in on an AP course and then see what it's really like, it might not seem so intimidating, because I think for some kids the idea, they just hear word on the street is that these AP courses are really challenging, and maybe if they sat in on one and found that it was engaging as well and challenging, so we could have like a shopping period in the spring for rising juniors and rising seniors to try out an AP course, and that might help with some of the enrollment issues.
One of the things that I've had experience with in the past is some summer programs that actually did the first several weeks of AP courses, and you can make it for IB courses, so kids get an opportunity. I think the emphasis is the IB and the AP are not gatekeepers. They're not things to keep kids away from. They're things to encourage students to participate in, and that's the thrust.
Any final questions, please, Mr.
I'm sorry, my last one. I mean, I apologize. Obviously, AP is but it's not like college placement is a bad thing either. And I think I want to be clear. Just because you don't do AP should absolutely in no way be, a detriment. And I want to be cautious of not overemphasizing pushing into AP. I just want to, and I think you have it. I just want to be that there's a balanced message of it's here if you want it, and if you don't want it, you'll be just fine. I think that's really what we're saying, right?
Thank you. Thank you again to the curriculum team for an informative presentation, both at Curriculum Committee as well as this evening. I'd like to now move to audience recognition on any items, agenda or non-agenda. If you could come up and sign with Ms. LaPera. There's a 3-minute limit for public comment.
Ruth Jenkins, 354 Worcester Road. As far as the AP and the IB program, I think maybe PSATs are a little bit too late, that the teachers in the middle school can identify maybe some talented math students and start to work with them and encourage them and channel them towards some of these classes that maybe they didn't even think existed. The other things that I've been thinking about over many months is number one, the buses, number two, the districting, and number three, the kindergarten, the full-day kindergarten. As far as the buses are concerned, I'd like you to consider a bus report, reevaluating the bus schedules I see many buses that pass through my neighborhood that are really pretty empty, and then there are many buses that are very full. I think that if we could be more efficient with the buses, that we could possibly have fewer buses, and that would make less of a problem. As far as the districting is concerned, my children went to Welsh Valley Middle School, and we live right here next to the high school, and so do many of their friends. And what happened to the Welsh Valley students is that they get districted to Harriton when many of them can actually walk to this area. And the BC students who get on a bus anyway, no matter where they're going, get districted to Lower Merion when they could be going to Harriton. So it's something to think about in terms of rescheduling this thing. I don't think that everything has to be written in stone. The third concept that I had discussed with the group for several years, and which seems to have taken hold, is the kindergarten, the full-day kindergarten, which we identified for at least the at-risk students. But I also think that if you could think about a kindergarten center, rather than thinking about adding on to all the elementary schools as they grow and grow and grow, if you would have a kindergarten center, a full-day center, then you would free up all the kindergarten classrooms that are in the elementary schools and have an opportunity, instead of building on there, maybe find a building that you could use for a full-day kindergarten. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Goodan is not here about buses. So, I know that there is a constant reevaluation of the transportation situation. So, and they're always doing that. I will tell you my experiences, and it may be in Lower Merion, that in the nice weather, students don't always take the bus, and so the bus may look empty. And then when the bad weather comes, they get back on the buses. So that may be part of what you're seeing.
There are some buses that are empty all the time. I've lived here for 35 years. I've watched the buses, through many different changes in the school system, and many of them are just a few kids get on. And I know that you're obligated to provide busing for all students that need busing. But sometimes it's very small group that could be consolidated.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Any other comment? Harrison. Please, if you could sign in with Ms. LaPera. Oh, you already signed in? Please, thank you.
So I apologize if this is a little bit premature, but I have drafted a petition which I plan to distribute to the Lower Merion student body.
Can you tell us your name and where in the township
Oh,
you
I'm
live?
so sorry.
No problem.
I signed in. I guess I thought it just transmitted directly into your minds. Right. So I'm Harrison Meyer. I live in Wynwood, near South Ardmore Park. So like I was saying, I drafted a petition, and the petition specifically is about delaying high school start times in line with the CDC research, the American Academy of Pediatrics research, and well, really, there are a lot of researching bodies that conclude that adolescents would be better served if their high school started at around 8:30 or 9 o'clock. So I'm seeing if there's community support for that. That's why, since I haven't done that yet, this might be a little bit premature. But I would just encourage all of you, if you haven't already, to look at those studies. And there's also there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of information about school districts around the country that have already done that have their high schools starting later. And there are, of course, a lot of problems, but a lot of solutions as well. So that's all I wanted to say. I want to encourage you to look into the research, and I will come back to you hopefully soon with thousands of signatures. Thank you.
Thank you, Harrison. We appreciate your comment. Any additional comments? All right. So with that, thank you for coming. We are adjourned.